Today, we're diving into one of classical music's greatest success stories. We're talking about the 12 legendary London Symphonies of Joseph Haydn, and we're going to explore how modern technology is giving us a completely fresh way to understand the genius behind these timeless masterpieces.
So, here's a question for you. We can all hear the genius in a piece of music, right? But can we actually see it? That's what we're digging into today. How can we visualize the strategic brilliance of a composer from over 200 years ago? Well, let's find out.
To get our answer, we have to travel back in time, way back, to the late 18th century, a period of massive change. And we're going to meet the man often called the father of the symphony, the one and only Joseph Haydn. Now, for most of his career, Haydn was this revered but honestly pretty secluded figure. He was the music director for the super-wealthy Esterházy family, out in their lavish but very isolated Hungarian palace. So all this incredible music he was writing, it was mostly heard by a tiny, privileged audience. He was, in a way, a brilliant, well-kept secret.
And then, in 1790, everything just flips on its head. Haydn's patron, Prince Nicholas, dies, and his son, the new prince, well, he just wasn't that into music. So he dismisses most of the court musicians and basically tells the 58-year-old Haydn, "You're free to go." After 3 decades of service, Haydn was suddenly a free agent.
But you know what? This moment of uncertainty didn't last long at all. In fact, it was the start of an absolutely extraordinary new chapter that would take Haydn from the quiet countryside to the biggest stage in the world, turning him into a global celebrity.
An impresario, a kind of music promoter named Johann Peter Salomon, heard the news and wasted zero time. He literally rushed to Vienna, knocked on Haydn's door, and pretty much said, "You're coming with me." He made him an offer he just couldn't refuse. Come to London, write new music for a huge public audience, and conduct it yourself. The adventure was on.
And you have to understand, this was a massive shift. Haydn was leaving the safe, predictable world of composing for one family and diving headfirst into the chaotic, commercial, and incredibly exciting music scene of London. He wasn't a servant anymore. He was a star, and he had to win over a paying crowd.
Of course, his friends, including Mozart, were a little worried. I mean, Haydn was almost 60, he'd barely traveled, and he spoke very little English. But Haydn, he was full of confidence. His response has become legendary, and it just captures the universal power of his music. It was a bold statement, and he was about to prove it was true.
And boy, did he ever prove it. Haydn made 2 triumphant trips to London, and during these visits, he composed his final 12 symphonies. This collection, it's the absolute peak of his art, and really, the definition of the classical symphony itself.
And this right here shows you the new reality. He wasn't playing in some private palace chamber. His symphonies premiered here, at the Hanover Square Rooms, for hundreds of people, middle-class folks and aristocrats alike, who all paid for their tickets. This new audience was smart, they were demanding, and they had a direct impact on the spectacular music he wrote for them.
So what was it about these 12 symphonies that just blew London away and cemented Haydn's legacy forever? Let's take a look at the innovations that made them true masterpieces. Haydn really pulled out all the stops. His London symphonies are just bigger, bolder, and more dramatic than anything he'd done before. He was writing for a larger orchestra, which now included clarinets, a cool, newish instrument at the time with this rich, versatile sound. And he filled the music with daring harmonies, catchy folk tunes, and of course, his trademark wit and surprise. Speaking of which, Haydn had a wicked sense of humor, and he paid close attention to his audience. He started to notice that some folks, maybe after a big dinner, had a tendency to nod off during the gentle, slow movements. So he decided to have a little fun with them. In the middle of this very quiet, almost lullaby-like passage in his Symphony No. 94, he unleashed a sudden, massive, super loud chord from the entire orchestra. It became known, of course, as the Surprise Symphony. It's just a perfect example of a composer having a playful conversation with his listeners. And that inventiveness is just everywhere in these 12 symphonies. You got the military, which uses these exotic percussion instruments to sound like a battle. Then there's the clock, with its playful ticking rhythm. The drum roll kicks off with this incredibly dramatic solo on the timpani. And his very last one, the London, ends with a wild Croatian folk dance. Every single one is a masterpiece designed to thrill the audience.
So these symphonies have been loved for centuries. But now, let's get back to our original question and see them in a way nobody in Haydn's time ever could. How can modern technology help us see the genius behind this music?
Okay, this is where it gets really cool. The answer comes from a brand new field of musicology. Researchers have developed a tool called orchestral graphs. You can think of them as a visual blueprint of a symphony. They don't just show the notes, they actually map how a composer uses all the different instruments and combines their unique sounds across an entire piece.
By turning the score into a dynamic chart like this one, we can literally see the architecture of Haydn's music. We can watch as he passes a melody from the violins over to the flutes, or how he builds a massive wall of sound with everyone playing, or creates this intense suspense with just one lonely instrument.
And what these graphs show us is, well, it's stunning. They show us how Haydn used instrumental color not just for decoration, but as a real storytelling tool to guide our ears. We can see his mastery of balancing complex and simple textures, creating these dense moments and then sudden, beautiful clarity. We see his incredible mind for structure and drama. It's his entire game plan, laid out for us to see.
So, what's the big deal? Why does looking at a 200-year-old symphony this way even matter today? Well, seeing Haydn's work through this modern lens connects his historical genius directly to the future of music.
See, Haydn, with his London triumphs, didn't just write a great final chapter for his own career. He perfected the classical symphony. He set a whole new standard, and a young, fiery composer back in Austria was paying very close attention. It was these very symphonies that a young Ludwig van Beethoven studied obsessively before he grabbed that symphonic form and launched it into the explosive Romantic era. Haydn didn't just write masterpieces, he passed the torch.
What all of this really shows us is that Haydn's genius isn't just in the beautiful melodies we can all hum, it's in the brilliant, intricate architecture holding it all together. And today, thanks to these new tools, we can appreciate that structure, that strategy, more clearly than ever before.
It proves that even the most famous art from the past still has new secrets to show us if we just know how to look. And that leaves us with a pretty thrilling question. What other masterpieces, in music, painting, or literature, are just out there, waiting for a new lens to help us see their genius in a completely different way?